So we have been talking about the various earthing systems that we can use and uh, whether we do solid earthing or we employ any of the other techniques in order to be able to estimate the potential rise on the earth, we need to know both the fault current as well as the earth resistivity. Now, the earth resistivity, we must remember that when earth conducts, it is primarily an electrolytic conduction, and it happens because in the earth we have rocks, we have different kinds of soil. Soil's nature of soil varies, the quality of soil varies from place to place geographically as well as just spatially, and there is water which is absorbed in the rock and the soil. So taken together, the soil, the rock, and the water together decides what the earth resistivity is going to be. So the resistivity of the soil or rock will vary from place to place, and it will depend on various factors. It will depend upon the type of the electrolyte. So when I say a type of the electrolyte, we are talking about the constituent of the earth, what kind of soil, what kind of rock, what are the sizes, how well packed they are. The temperature, conductivity of any material depends on temperature, and the degree of porosity or the how fractured the material is. So all these things taken together determine the earth resistivity, and we need to be able to measure the earth resistivity to be able to measure what kind of potential rise we can expect. So apart from earth resistivity, we are also interested in the fault current, because the fault current, given a particular earth resistance, the fault current magnitude will decide the short-time thermal rating of the equipment. So how much fault current flows through an equipment will decide what its thermal rating is and what should be the settings of the protective relays. And this is something that we are well aware of, but in the context of earthing, we should remember that it is the fault current besides the earth resistance which will determine how much potential rise there will be on the earth. They will determine the current magnitude that will flow through the earthing system under fault conditions, and therefore it will determine the earth potential rise. And therefore, given the earth potential, which we have through measurements, or also we can have earth resistivity maps, which tells us the resistance of earth at a geographical location, we need to examine the situation for various fault conditions and examine what would be the fault current in these different cases, what would be the fault current that is flowing through the earth system, and what kind of potential rise this will result in. And that will determine the efficacy of our system. So different earth fault locations should be examined because they will have effect on the earth current magnitude, return current magnitude. So we would need to measure the faults both at the high voltage side as well as the low voltage side, because when there are faults external to the substation, they may have different impacts at different points in the earth, different points in the substation, and may result in different potential rises. So let us take an example. Let us say that we have an earth fault here and the current is supposed to return through the earth. So you have a current IF which is flowing at in fault conditions. And remember, when an earth fault occurs, the current will attempt to return through the earth along the path of least risk impedance. And this will be generally the earth grid which is connected to the neutral at the source end. But it will also attempt to find alternate paths. For example, if the earthing system of the source and faulted substation are interconnected, let's say there is an earth wire there is an earth wire in the shielded transmission line, or there is the sheath of an underground cable, in which case, apart from the earth path, there is an additional path which is available to the fault current. This addition, for example, in the case of underground cable, the sheath provides an alternate path. If you have an overground transmission line, as I said, it could be simply the earth wire. It would simply be the earth wire. So let us consider the cable. If you have a cable, then the fault current is going to be divided into two paths. As a consequence, the earth current fault return current will be reduced. So you have here IF, And then IF has two alternate paths. One is through the earth path and the other is through the sheath of the conductor. Let us imagine that ZC is the self-impedance of per unit length of the shield conductor and ZMPC is the mutual impedance per unit length between the phase and shield conductors. So here we see a current which shows the current distribution between the sheath and the ground return path for a two substation arrangement where you have a three-core cable. So as a result, the I ground, that is the return current, will be not IF, but will be only a fraction of that, fraction of the fault current IF, and this fraction is determined by the impedance at ZC, ZMPS, and ZEA, ZEB, and the length of AB. So depending upon the earth resistances, earth impedances of point A and point B, and the relative impedance of the ground path and the shield conductor, the ground current will be determined. And if you have a reduction in the ground current, if the entire fault current does not flow through the ground current, you have a consequent reduction in the earth potential rise, irrespective of the value of the earth resistivity. So this is one option where you can reduce the fault current that is flowing through the ground. Now, how do we measure? So therefore, it's not enough to measure the earth resistivity. We need to measure the earth resistivity. We need to consider the various fault conditions, and we need to be able to estimate the earth potential rise under these different fault conditions. And this brings us to what is called the fall of potential earth resistance impedance measurement. Here, what we do is at a particular point, a test current is injected into the electrode, into the earth through the electrode under test. So let's say this is the test electrode and a current is injected. Now this will find a path through the earth and we will have another test or auxiliary electrode at a distance P from the point of injection. This could be here 2, here 3, etc. So this point could be, we can make this measurement at different points P, at successive points P, which are certain distances away from each other from the point of injection. So first here and then here and then here. And these are all along a straight line. So along the straight line, we keep going, we keep increasing the value of P and we keep measuring the potential rise. The difference in potential between the test electrode and an auxiliary potential electrode is measured at successive points. And these points are identified at distance P along a straight line close to the current carrying the lead. So this is the potential difference. Let's say first we put it at point 2, which is P distance away from point 1, measured the voltage, measured the current, and you get the resistance. Change this, take the auxiliary electrode to this point, and then take the auxiliary electrode at several points until you reach point 3. Let's say the distance, that 3 is C. It's a C distance away. And then what we do is, for the various values of C, the auxiliary current electrode spacing, we measure the apparent resistance, which is the voltage to current ratio that we have just measured, and we plot that. Now, so the ratio of the voltage to current is known as the apparent resistance, and this is plotted against the distance P to form an earth resistance curve. So this is the earth resistance curve. Now, there is a qualitative difference between these 2 points. Here we are working with 2 different values of C. This is for a value of C which is much smaller. So let's say a value of C which is let's say P.618, that's a maximum value. We are taking a small value of C and we are taking a considerable larger value of C to obtain curve 1. Now the qualitative difference that we see between curve 2 and curve 1 is that in curve 1 there is a large plateau region along which the apparent resistance remains the same. Whereas in this situation, we don't really see a plateau, we see a almost continuously changing resistance. In which case, it will be very difficult to estimate the earth apparent resistance or the resistance of the earth at that point. When you have a plateau like this plateau, the value of the resistance in this plateau region gives us the earth resistance of the electrode, and this is the earth resistance of the electrode is determined by the apparent resistance in the Plato region, where you are sufficiently far away, you're not too far away, but sufficiently far away for the value to have stabilized, for the ratio of V to V by I to have stabilized. So in this way, for various fault conditions, and not only for fault conditions, not only at one particular point, but for fault conditions in the high voltage side, on the low voltage sides, at various locations, you need to be able to estimate what is the kind of potential rise that you expect. Why is that important? Because depending upon the potential rise of the earth that you expect, you will be able to determine the electrocution hazards. Apart from, of course, the safety to equipment, safety devices, such that proper grounding is done, there is also the concept of electrocution hazards to personnel or bystanders. And for this, we have different definitions of the potential rise that we are interested in, and especially what we have are the step potential, the touch potential, the step transfer potential, touch transfer potential. Let us see what we mean by that. Now, the earth impedance, since from the point of fault and the fault current flowing through the earth path, so the earth current begins to flow up the point of the fault initiation or fault location, and from there it begins to flow through the earth. There is a potential rise because of the current flow through the earth. Also, there might be a rise of earth potential of the earthing system with respect to the remote earth. So what really happens is, at the location as well as at locations away from the point of fault, there would be, because of the fault current flowing, there would be a rise in the potential of the earth points, the earthing system points on the earthing system with respect to the remote earth. So ordinarily, what we would want is, we would want the earthing, every point on the earthing system to be at the same potential, and they should be at should not have any potential difference with reference to the global earth or the remote earth, which is ground zero conditions. Now, what happens is, when high currents flow, because of the earth resistivity, because of high fault currents flowing, we might acquire two situations. That is, different points on the earth system may not be at the same potential, and they will, all of them, at each of these points, you will obtain a potential rise with respect to the remote earth. And depending on that, we define what are called touch potential. So let's say this is the point where you have earthing, and let's say you do not have any potential grading. So this is your earth electrode and a current is flowing directly to ground. Because of that, if you do not have any potential grading, then what you will see is, you will see a rise in the potential of the various points of the earth system with respect to the reference earth. So originally this is your reference earth, and every point here is expected to be at this potential. But here you see the figure of a stick figure of a man, and there is a potential difference between the two steps, between the 2 feet, when the person takes a step in the direction of the potential gradient, and this is the step potential. So as you can see, this is the step potential that a person, so you have at this point a increase in potential with respect to earth. This is your earth potential, rises above the reference potential, and then a person will have a certain UST. UST is the source UST is the source voltage for touching. So when this person touches any earthed part of the equipment, this person will not be touching a zero potential, and therefore there will be a potential rise, there will be a potential difference across his body, and that is given by UST. This is the source voltage for touching. So when the person touches, the person will feel a potential difference across his body between his fingers and the feet which are at ground, and therefore this potential will circulate a current through his body, and that can be dangerous if it is beyond a certain value. So what you have is the source voltage for touching, and then you have the source step voltage. That is the potential difference between the 2 feet of the person, and this is on the USS. This is the on the source side. So this is the difference, the potential difference between 2 feet of the person, USS. That is your, so actually when the person is standing very small distance apart, let's say fictitiously 1 meter, 1 meter is a reasonable estimate for the stride of a person. These 2 feet are 1 meter apart, and along this 1 meter there is a potential rise of this value USS. So this value USS appears across the 2 feet of the person and causes a current to circulate through its body. Similarly, you have here UST, which is the touch voltage, which is the difference in potential between the feet and the touch, the hands of the person, UST, and that this potential difference is there, and this is at the source site. So we have several potentials shown in this figure. You have EE, which is the earth potential rise due to the fault current flowing. USS, which is the step voltage rise, a source step voltage. UST is the source voltage for touching, which is UST. And UTST is what you see very far away, which has been transferred at the other end, at a condition, at a location which is far away from the source. You will see some transferred potential rise. So UTST is the transfer source voltage for touching if the sheath is not earth at the remote end. So you have earthing here, but you should have to, and you still see a potential rise. And if you do not have an additional earthing here, to make sure that all points at a remote location are also brought to at the same potential, what you will see is, you will see UTST, which is the transferred source voltage for touching, and then you have UTSTE, which is the transferred source voltage for touching. UTSTE, if the sheath is earth. So as you can see, if you do not have earthing, the UTST will be much larger, whereas if you do have earthing, the UTSTE is a much smaller potential difference, which means by earthing, providing additional earthing at the remote end, you can bring down the potential difference that a person touching the earthed parts of the equipment will experience across his body. And then, of course, what you can have is, you can have potential grading earth electrodes, where you have additional electrodes which may not be an auxiliary electrode but may be underground, and this earth is in series connected to various ring earth electrodes to ensure proper grading, so that you have the potential rise is graded and limited by these intervening potential grading earth electrodes. So you don't work with just one earth electrode, you work with several earth electrodes which allow you to grade the potential between the earth, the reference earth, and the fault potential rise that happens due to fault conditions. So these are the various things that we need to keep in mind and need to control, keep within safe values to prevent electrocution hazards under fault conditions, and these have to be examined at various locations and for different kinds of faults. We must remember certain things. Step voltages are normally less hazardous than touch voltages. Firstly, as you can see, the step voltage is a smaller quantity than the touch voltage, probably because of the distance between the two touching objects. The feet cannot be very far apart, whereas the hands and the feet can be further apart. But there is one more thing. When you have a foot-to-foot path and the current flows from one foot to another foot, it generally, but there's not such a lot of current flowing through the heart. So the human body can tolerate higher voltages across the foot-to-foot path compared to hand-to-foot path, which is the touch voltage, especially because the amount of current which flows through the path of the heart is called the heart current factor, and we can well imagine that in case of the step voltage, the heart current factor is going to be lower, so the person is likely to be at a lesser danger. We must also remember that when we consider the step voltage, touch voltage, we must remember that there would be some additional resistances which will be provided by the human body. For example, the person will be wearing shoes. That is why you're always asked to wear shoes in the electrical lab, not only in the high voltage lab, especially in other labs. In high voltage lab, you're supposed not to go anywhere very close. I mean, the footwear should not come into the picture, but footwear, then surface stripping, etc. These will come into the picture, and for any given position the step voltage is anyway lower than the prospective touch voltage, so the step voltage is less hazardous. What are the kinds of potentials and currents we are looking at which are safe for human bodies? Electricity flowing through the human body, what it does is it causes muscle contractions for a few. So you will see muscle contractions even if you have currents as low as milliamperes. So even if a few milliamperes or a few tens of milliamperes of currents are flowing, the human body will show muscle contraction, and even smaller currents the human body can perceive. For example, when we have a small shock from the socket, we can feel it, but it doesn't cause any damage. But we see muscle contraction, but when you go to values of current which are of the order of 50 milliamperes, there is always the risk of ventricular fibrillation, and those are the values that you should not, you should attempt to avoid. The resistance of the human body, when you're trying to model the earth current, the earth fault, etc., normally the resistance of the human body is assumed to be equal to a constant value of 1 kilo ohm. Now, what can we do to reduce the earth impedance? We have figured out several ways of trying to reduce the fault current. There are other ways which we have not discussed. We have discussed various earthing conditions. As I mentioned, we don't really spend so much time trying to reduce the earth impedance, but there are some small ways in which the earth impedance can be easily reduced. If you make connections not only to the earth, but you also make additional connections to nearby existing grids. So in that case, you're spreading out the earthing system, and this can reduce the overall earth impedance. You are providing a extended circuit, and the total equivalent resistance or the equivalent impedance of the total connected grid will be much smaller if in comparison to when you have one point connection. These extended earthing systems are formed by tire lines or cables, and if that is there, then these extended earthing systems should also be directly connected to the main earth grid. So you make as many earth connections as possible, provide as many parallel paths as possible, bring down the equivalent impedance. The first thing, of course, is if you have the resistivity map of the earth and you have more or less an idea about where you want to set up your station, choose a low resistivity earth region which can be identified from the earth resistivity maps. So you have some advantage to start with. Instead of extending the earthing system outwards, it may not be possible always, and it also takes up a lot of space, and it may not be effective all the time. As I just mentioned in the previous slide, what you can do is you can install deep driven earth rods or piles or drilled earth wells. So you go deeper into the earth and you install earthing connections along the height, along the depth. They penetrate deeper earth layers, and the deeper you go, the earth layers are expected to have lower resistivity, and more importantly, they're likely to have stable resistivity because they will not be interfered with. There will be less reason for the resistivity of a soil layer deep under the ground to change. There will be less moisture ingress, there will be less changes, whereas on the top layer can change with conditions changing. If the earth blows up, for example, in substations, we put pebbles on the surface. But what happens is over time, this change because the pebbles fracture, they become more granular, and the effectiveness is lost. So instead of trying to cover a bigger surface area, it might make more sense to cover go deeper into the ground and extend the earthing system into the depth of the earth. Also, what we can do is we can treat the soil with additives or some other techniques so that the earth resistivity in the immediate vicinity of the earth electrodes can be reduced. So we cannot, of course, change the resistivity of the entire earth system, but in the vicinity of the earthing electrodes, we can to a certain extent change change the resistivity of the soil and thereby bring down the, that is where you have the highest fault current, that in the vicinity you can bring down the currents. In this way, the earth impedance can be reduced. So the point actually is not primarily to reduce the fault current. Yes, reducing fault current is important because the reduction in the fault current doesn't only give you advantages in earthing, it also gives you advantages in the equipment, in the circuit breakers, etc. But the earth resistivity, reducing the earth resistivity or reducing the effective earth resistivity by changing this path that the earth path is, changing the earth path can be techniques, but our main objective ultimately is to limit the potential difference, or limit the potential rise in the vicinity of the earthing electrodes. Now, if this is what we want to do, the best thing would be to take a solid plate and cover the entire surface area. So if we have a metal covering of the entire area, the potential, it's a good conductor, and therefore the potential rise between points will be limited to the minimum possible value. And this will be the ultimate protection against step and touch voltage hazards. However, this is not always practicable. So instead of using a solid plate, we can use an overall grid mesh. The density can be such that in hazardous region, the density of the mesh can be high. Far away, the mesh can have a lower density. In this way, we can have material saving. Basically, the idea is to provide a general equipotential area within the installation and around the installation. Also, we should identify the accidental paths. Where is a person likely to touch? What path is he likely to accidentally complete? Increase the resistance in the accidental path. As I just mentioned, for example, a person will be standing on the ground and there is a touch potential and a step potential. We would like to reduce the value of the maximum touch potential and the maximum step potential. One way to do that would be to cover the entire surface of the substation with gravel, because this will provide a high resistance barrier even under wet conditions. Remember, we have the most hazardous situations is when you have moisture on the surface. So if you have this gravel, there will be discontinuities in the path. There will be no single water film between 2 points, and that will provide a high resistance barrier. Provide insulation to earthing downloads and insulate or provide isolation from all above ground metal work that can be touched from ground level. So try to earth every point. Try to provide insulation to even the earthing points so that a person who touches it will be insulated from the temporary potential rise. So these are all extra precautions that we need to take from the point of view of hazards or electrocution hazards to personnel as well as to people in the vicinity. People who are not expected to be there, but there is always a possibility, more than for humans, there might be stray animals, etc. So we need to take these precautions. For people who are not aware of the risk, who might stray into the area, that they will not be subjected to. When they're subjected to accidental shocks, they are somewhat protected. So earthing is a very important and very tricky situation. This is the book that I have referenced for the earthing section.